And I want to ask you, starting off, Mr. Cicconi, your company is one of the many companies who's invested tremendously. We had testimony a few weeks ago from the FCC. All five FCC commissioners came before us talking about this new regulation of the Internet, net neutrality. And we heard testimony from one commissioner, nobody disputed it, that over $500 billion of investment has been made to build the broadband infrastructure that exists today that allows all this innovation. And none of that was taxpayer money, by the way. Maybe that's one of the things that this administration doesn't like. It all happened with private investment. How much money has your company invested in allowing this innovation and creating and building this network infrastructure?
I don't have an exact figure in front of me, Mr. Scalise, but last year we invested approximately $19 billion in capital. I think.
How much is that? Can you say that again?
$19 billion in capital in the United States. Nearly all of that was in the United States, and I think that was more than any other American company invested in the United States last year.
And that was under non-net neutrality rules.
Correct. And this year we'll invest roughly between $17 and $19 billion in capital again.
And let me ask you this, because in your statement, I listened to your testimony, and you used a number of comments that I thought were interesting. And you know, some people act as if you're really thrilled about net neutrality, and maybe some people are thrilled about it. But in your statement, you said all of this without any real evidence of a problem. It's still AT&T's strong preference to have no regulation. The proposal was extreme and upset the financial markets. You're talking about earlier proposals, and then ultimately you said the only proposals before us were either bad or worse. So here you've got the government coming in and saying, okay, first of all, there is no problem. The innovation has never been greater, and no industry in the history of the world has seen this much innovation. And so now the government's going to come in and regulate it, but they're going to give you some options, and we're going to give you a bad option and a worse option. Well, anybody would say, well, I guess I'll take the bad option instead of the worse option. And that, to some people on the other side, constitutes you supporting this new regulation of the Internet. So I just want to put it in that context, but ask you, because you expressed this as a concern, there's an assumption by some that the FCC is going to interpret these rules in a very narrow way. What if the FCC does not interpret these rules in a narrow way, which if we're not able to pass our legislation to block the regulation, the FCC would be free to interpret it as broadly as they'd like? What if they don't interpret the rules narrowly?
Well, I think it depends on the circumstance, sir. Clearly we would reserve the right to challenge that in court if something were to occur that we feel is inconsistent with the plain language of the rule.
And I'm sure some people would think that's good to have now companies that innovate, that add $17 billion of their own capital to build out the infrastructure, are now concerned about maybe having to go to court to be able to continue innovating. Let me ask you, Ms. Chase,